Here we go. Okay, so then generally this is my favorite part where I get to see the participants roll in and see my friends. Hello everybody, we are back. It's Thursday, happy hour, MMLG. So many of you may know, I see some familiar faces and some new people in our attendees. We started this webinar series, MMLG, during the pandemic and Safer at Home as a way to connect and share information and help operators to navigate through these intense times. And it's been so great. It's been so great for me to be able to connect with everybody and meet new people and feel like we're actually doing something and helping people. The feedback we've gotten has been really nice. So this week, this is our 9th webinar, I think. And I'm really excited to have this esteemed panel of associates that we're going to go around and we'll do some introductions. So I think maybe I'll start with Xavier, Vice President of Ucba. How about you give us a quick intro?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me, Julie. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak as not only the Vice President of Ucba, but as a stakeholder. I've been in this industry for over 13 years now. My shop is located in Council District 15, so I am in the city of Wilmington. It's been an up and down experience, and still to this day, this industry continues to change and evolve. And so having a voice and being present, I think has been rewarding because I get to see it firsthand, but at the same time, take a lot of hits, you know, and you just got to learn how to get up and continue to move forward, because I feel that if I'm moving forward, so is the industry, because I can pick up on things and issues that impact my business and therefore impact everybody else's. And if we could help fix those problems, and it's something that we could advocate and push for, we always like to push hard and get those items fixed.
Thank you. I'm so happy you're able to be here with us. Doug, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Julia. I'm Doug Esposito. My insurance brokerage firm is Owen Dunn Insurance Services. We're part of Assured Partners, a larger national firm. And, you know, I've been in insurance 20 years and really committed to the cannabis niche, you know, 6 years ago. So really have seen a lot of change. There's still a lot of change that needs to happen, at least from an insurance risk management standpoint. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. I'm very active in the CCIA as well. I'm the co-chair of the Risk Management Committee. And so I just appreciate being with operators, being with the other people that we can really learn more of what you're doing and how to make the rest of the community more comfortable so that we can get more carriers and better coverages, better terms, rates, etc. Blah. So thank you.
Thanks, Doug. And Tony.
How are you? So my name is Tony Gallo. I'm the managing partner for Sapphire Risk Advisory Group. Been in the high-risk security field over 20 years. Been in the cannabis security field for about 7 years. We're one of the few national security consulting companies who've worked with over 350 cannabis clients, built out 60 cannabis facilities. As you can imagine, we were quite busy when it came to the civil unrest that just occurred. And I'm looking forward to having that conversation today.
Thank you all so much for being here. So the idea for this, and I do want to say to the attendees that you can enter questions in the Q&A box. Generally, the way that we do this is we have a conversation. I try to keep it around 30, 40-ish minutes and leave some time to address your questions. And if you put your questions in the box as we're going, then sometimes we can see them and address them as we're going. Well, first, I just want to take a moment to reflect upon the idea for this one was, I mean, we've been wanting to talk about security insurance for a long time, and it just seems to be taking on more and more importance. When we think about all that we've been through since legalization, there's that, and then just this year of, with the pandemic, in March, safer at home orders, the exceptional designation of cannabis businesses as essential, which is something that I know UCBA advocated strongly for. Taking our workers and our staff and everyone involved in the industry through COVID preparedness and adaptations of business and all of the issues around that. And then on top of that, in May, with the murder of George Floyd and all of the heightened attention and protests around those issues, the civil unrest, the protesting that we saw, and then add to that property damage, robberies, targeted robberies, you know, the industry's been through a lot. That's what I'd like to acknowledge. And then looking at that from the perspective of one, I think Tony and Xavier, but let's start with, what was your experience through that time? What did you see? How and how did businesses fare through, not just the businesses and their property, but I mean also the people through this experience?
Sure. Javier, do you want to start off, or?
Go ahead, Tony.
So, like I said, we're a national company and we've worked in 24 states. And during that time of this unrest, we dealt with 43 dispensaries were attacked in one fashion or another, or break-ins. We had 86 pawn shops, which is another high-risk business. Large amount of cash, very desirable piece of merchandise, just like the cannabis, and 114 jewelry stores. So you're talking about 250 locations nationwide that experience some sort of civil unrest. And one of the things that our takeaway was, we do a lot of work with owners when it comes to designing their security for the day-to-day issues, whether it's employee theft, whether it's break-ins, whether it's robbery awareness. But when you get with the civil unrest, there was a lot of takeaways that a lot of business owners were not prepared for and did not anticipate that their security may not have been up to speed for that kind of attack. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. Xavier?
Right. I mean, it was an emotional roller coaster because we felt united with the community, and to see that come, our business was breached in the middle of the night. But for a long time, I've always kept a 24-hour security presence here at my location, and for the most part, you know, things were quiet until that night. He was able to sound an alarm, which kind of scared them away. But I know a lot of businesses that were vandalized and burglarized. And it's unfortunate, and I don't know how many had overnight security prior to this, but I think that it's an important part of business, at least for me, to have that extra peace of mind at night that I have somebody looking over our business, along with the cameras and everything else that we have. We have a vault, and then inside of the vault, our safe. So we do add that extra layer, but that human component sometimes does come in and reacts a little quicker because they're able to, you know, call PD, backup, or whatever it is to prevent any further damage to your business.
Well, so one of the things that was very interesting during the civil unrest was how there's a difference between your day-to-day security when it comes to break-ins compared to what happens when you have a civil unrest. Xavier mentioned, you know, having guards at a location is a fabulous way of deterring the normal person who might want to break into your location. But when you have to deal with 100 or 500 or 1,000 people who are attacking your location, we did actually have a couple of dispensaries that had security at the location, and because of the chance of serious physical violence, had to pull out and allow the looters to enter the location. So, you know, when I looked at what happened in the aftermath of the civil unrest, it's interesting to see, you know, I wrote down three big notes. Was the shatterproof glass, which is a great deterrent in a lot of robberies or break-ins, really didn't have much value in a civil unrest, unlike the metal roll downs that you would see on a building. And you know, that was interesting to see that, because they have all the time, or very much time in the world to enter, unlike a normal break-in where you only have a small amount of time. The alarm system's going off, the police are responding. The second thing that I saw that I found that was very interesting is that the Cmu walls, or the concrete walls, didn't really hold up as well as you would think, or the metal doors that was put on the vaults did not hold up compared to locations that actually had a metal vault environment with a real vault door, or used the safes. You know, in the 243 break-ins that we were involved in, or we have knowledge of, not one of those was their safes that had a TL rated safe was breached. I don't know, Julie, do you want me to talk about that now, or?
I would, because I think it's an important perspective from a compliance perspective, is
Sure.
that what the kind of nuts and bolts of those decisions, where some things that might be good enough for the state or be good enough for your insurance in terms of getting you a passable security plan may not actually pan out to protect your goods or your cash in practice, is
Sure.
what I'm seeing, right?
Right. So let me share something with you. Again, we work in 24 states. California, we're very much involved in. We're actually building out several locations right now. And I wanted to share a quick little slideshow with you to show you that. So these are gun safes. A lot of California, when they first started, can you see my screen just to make sure?
No, let me make sure.
Okay.
I'm going to give you, let me give you full, I'm going to give you the full host. So
okay.
Hopefully you can.
All right. Let me know if you, when
We're gonna trust you,
okay.
Tony.
You're my host. I'm giving you the,
okay.
you the reins.
How about now? Can you see it now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I was saying is, when you look at safes in the California market, when you first started, it was acceptable to use what's a gun. It's called a gun safe. If you go to most states throughout the United States, the cannabis laws really don't allow you to use these kind of safes anymore. And here's the reason why. The safe is really not designed to withstand an attack from a break-in, or really withstand an attack from a civil disturbance. And the reason is because a gun safe has sheetrock inside, and it's really designed to prevent a fire from occurring and damaging your firearms. The sheetrock actually is a great idea. If there was a fire, sheetrock absorbs the heat and prevents it from happening. But when you look at actually what it does, if someone wants to attack it, it's very easy to get in. So there was no TL rated safes, which I'll show you in a second, that were breached, but many gun safes were breached and cash and merchandise was taken. You can look here and you can see the difference of what I showed you before. A TL rated safe is showing you how it's made out of concrete inside, unlike a gun safe that has just a piece of metal in the middle of it. So a lot of the takeaway that I seen, in fact, this was actually a break-in last night, 2 nights ago, and all requires to, and they did not get into this TL rated safe, but all requires to get into a gun safe is something that you can buy at Home Depot. So a lot of dispensaries, especially in the California market, had their safes breached, but it was really because the safe wasn't the perfect design. And I think Doug will talk to you a little bit about the insurance requirements, which sometimes may not follow suit when it comes to the actual need from a security. In fact, there's even safes now. This is a safe that's designed actually for the cannabis industry itself. You know, it has various components to it. But again, this is what's called, it's a TL or tool and lock safe. It's definitely the kind of safe you want. You want to prevent something of this nature. So, you know, that was a quick little presentation, but what I'm trying to get across is that is one of the takeaways from this is 243 attacks. Most of them were, the safes were attacked. Most of those stores did not experience any losses other than those stores that did not have the adequate security. And then the other thing, you know, we looked at is alarm systems. You know, alarm systems are huge, you need that, but they didn't have any value when it came to a civil disturbance because no one was responding to the alarm system. But off-site video helped. You know, I think one of the things, a takeaway that we had was making sure you back up your data. We had stores that were completely ransacked. In fact, one of the stores was attacked 34 times in one night. At the end of the attack, there was nothing else to take. So one of the looters just took the picture of the baseball team of the owner's kid on the wall because he had to take something, I guess, and that's what he took. So, you know, that was the second takeaway I had of that. And then the last one, and I think Doug can chime in on that, is really let your insurance, you know, deal with the store. Don't be a hero. Don't stay at the location. We did have some people that did outside of the cannabis industry. A couple did lose their lives for that. And again, you know, from a security point of view, I've been doing this for over 20 years. Merchandise and money isn't worth it sometimes. And if you have an adequate security system and an adequate setup, just go home and be safe. And those are my three takeaways from this civil unrest.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I mean, I think remembering that the human element, where I know for operators in the cannabis industry, it can feel like, you know, they've dedicated so much of their lives to these businesses that is your baby, that's your family, that's your life. But you know, that's why we put these protocols in place. Of course, you want to have security, you want to have risk prevention, but when that's not possible, then we have risk management, right? Where then we have to move through it. And that's kind of where these aspects of your insurance come in. And I've learned so much through this process. I mean, being a compliance geek, of course, I'm obsessed with things that other people find super boring, but this interplay of how your security plan and protocols impacts the validity of your insurance has been such a critical part of a focus right now. So Doug, I think, you know, what you have to bring to this conversation in terms of how are people, one, clear on what is protected and what are they working with there, and how to ensure that it's truly protected through your actual practices. Would love for you to speak about that.
Yeah, no, you guys are making great points. And again, I mean, Tony, no doubt when it comes to, you know, life versus property, I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. But I can't, I mean, I'm not an operator, so I can't even fathom some of those challenges and emotional pulls. But, you know, everyone talks about risk management. I mean, and in the most simple terms, and I talk about it all the time too, but it's really just assessing, you know, generally what your operation is. What are you doing? Whether you're an extractor or a cultivator or a dispensary, but and then what can you do to maybe be safer or reduce loss or mitigate loss, a fancier word, you know? And the basics of that, if I could just start with, is really just identifying something that could cause a loss, you know, figure out how to measure it, then solve it. And insurance can be a solution, or avoidance, you know, just stop doing it. How about, you know, if you're gonna, you know, you've had some thefts and some hit and runs, like, you know, do the roll up door and pull the vehicle all the way in, and then roll the door back down, and then great, that you just now avoided a lot of opportunities for theft. But and then once you solved it, you know, just really monitoring it. But that's risk management in a nutshell. And this is where I just think everybody really needs to look at their business like, all right, what else can go wrong? You get kind of jaded if you're in insurance long enough, because you walk into a building and you're like looking up and is it sprinkler? Does it got this? Any sharp edges? You know, where's the cameras? But I mean, the biggest takeaway I think I've seen from all this is really like Julie said, you know your policy and what it covers. And I know that's not sexy. I mean, it's a piece of paper, and you pay a premium for this promise that if something goes wrong per that contract, that the carrier will do their part and pay for it. But you got to know, one, what it's covering. I mean, and the policies out there can cover all kinds of stuff, really anything that you want to insure. I mean, I've got some clients that have millions of exposure of cannabis that's uninsured, but yet they're insuring their equipment and their employees. And it's like, okay, but it's that conversation. So it's like, really, you know, you can insure your building from the physical box, the walls, the roof. You can insure the internal business personal property, the desks, the cabinetries, the safes, the equipment, you know, really everything. You can insure your crop. Now, if it's indoor, not outdoor, indoor crop, we can cover it, you know, because if you have a fire, you know, and all those vegging and flowers, I mean, you could get paid for that loss. But you need to know what you want to have covered and then what limits you need. So that's probably the biggest thing. And just to give you guys a nice kind of warm and fuzzy, vandalism and riots are normally, I'm talking 95% of the time, covered. So the first takeaway is really know what your policy covers. And then the second part, though, is there's protective safeguards that you have to have. And that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's the stuff where we dovetail with Tony so close, where you've got to have 24/7 cameras, backup, 2 weeks minimum. Most of the time they want more. This is where if you're going to have theft coverage, you've got to have a central station. Now, I'm making sweeping statements, but they're pretty spot on. I mean, you got to look at each individual policy, but if you want theft coverage, you got to have a central station burglar alert, you know? And now, just like Tony said, if you have a riot, no one might come, but that's beautiful because as long as it's working, let them take the whole place. As long as we've got the right limits and you got that central station alarm and we've got surveillance cameras, we can get coverage and no one has to risk their life. I mean, so that's two of the biggest pieces is know what the policy covers and call your broker. I mean, if your broker's not going over that, they can, should, or will, and then really just talk them through it. Even if the insurance sounds fancy, they could boil it down to really, hey, is this covered? No. Why not? Well, because of this, this, and this. Or, well, yes, if you do this. So I hate to say it, but you got to get more invested in your insurance, you know, so that you can feel good. And then probably my third takeaway though right now is renegotiate your terms right now, because with COVID was such a special event, and not special meaning good, but it's still here with us. There's a unique opportunity to go back to your broker and have them renegotiate. If you thought you were going to do 2 million in sales, but because of COVID, you're going to do 1 million in sales, negotiate your policy before it expires, because once that thing expires, they do not give money back. They don't give premiums back. They only charge more if you do more business than you thought. So you got this nice window of opportunity where you can go in and renegotiate that, and that can lower your premiums for right now. So those are just 2 or 3 quick things off the top of my head. What do you think, Julie?
It's great. I mean, the thing that I'm thinking about is I know that you know, people working in the cannabis space or owners, licensees come in and they may hire a security company to develop their security plan, and they get insurance, and they may have you know, compliance goals, but ultimately, you know, all of these day-to-day operations and the upholding of these plans and actions to remain compliant, to be safe, are carried out by human beings and by the workers on the floor. So I'm just thinking, I think Xavier, as you know, a deeply involved owner in your business, I'm just interested in talking about your experience. You know, there were so many decisions to be navigated, even just the ones we talked about. Do you close up your business and pull down the doors and leave? Do you keep operating and keep your security on staff? There was opportunities where people were, do I move my cannabis off site because I think it'll be safer somewhere else? And then sometimes not thinking of the impacts that could have on your insurance and your security plans. So, I mean, I just would love to hear from you about being an owner in your company culture and how you move through those decisions.
You know, it came in waves during that process because we communicated with all our members, and we were able to flag, like you pointed out early, to the state and to the city, like, we got to take down these licenses. Now, while retail has so many points of advertisement, it wasn't like you just take down the state and the city and no one knows where you're at. But the other licenses, the distribution licenses, the cultivation, the manufacturing licenses, those are never really public. No one's really advertising those. And so it's so important that we got those taken down. And so in waves, we were able to stop, you know, access to locations. So we saw less break-ins, but, you know, we communicated and tried to across the entire state. Some areas had more activity than others. But it came and it went, and even now it can come out of nowhere. And so you always want to have your on-site security. And as far as the culture, and I do speak as an owner that's mostly here, I have a great relationship with my security, you know, and also that projects out to my employees, and, you know, they don't work for me, they work with me. And so I'm side by side with them. There's good energy, and that goes back to the community, to the customers that come in. Everybody feels welcomed. And it's kind of like when you have a good neighbor and you see a fire, your neighbor comes out and tries to help you put the fire out. And so during this time, we were outreached by businesses around us to say, hey, if you need any help, and likewise back to them. And so a lot of it that you don't get in an SOP is the engagement that you have as a business owner with, you know, with your team, you know, your security, with your management. And while they're separate companies, to me, they're still here with me. They're my core family. And so they're my culture, and we all kind of embrace each other, and that projects back and that spreads out to the community. And I want to say that it contributes to keeping your place, you know, a little safer, but you can't predict or really prepare for what you don't know is coming. You know, to Tony's point, a lot of these waves that came, I don't think nobody was prepared for, no matter how much security and how much preparation you had, because everybody's had a case-by-case, different scenario in their business, to where all you can do is try to do the best that you can where you're at, and know that while we have SOPs, that's paper. Have a human element inside of your business if you're a business owner, and get to know your team so that everybody knows the feel, or if there's something coming. It just, the energy is better when you have that type of community.
Absolutely. I mean, I was impressed in many ways with the whole industry, including the agency's ability to navigate through the processes from essential businesses, from that designation to like the BCC having approvals for adaptations of business like curbside and signature list delivery for the pandemic protections. I do find it interesting that the cannabis industry and UCBA had been advocating for the removal of that license information since, I think UCBA wrote their letter in November of 2019. Right. So you would think that there was some advanced consideration that this could be a problem someday, or that, and I know that the agency had statutory issues and, you know, Public Information Acts to consider. So in light of that, I'm interested just in terms of a conversation from you guys' perspective. While no one can ever be completely prepared for all the unknowns to come in this wild thing that we call life, I mean, what are some of your key things that you think businesses should be doing to be forward thinking about these eventualities?
Well, I hope everybody has, you know, their TL rated safes. They have their votes on that security side. Everybody has their on-site security. We all have to have our cameras, and even when we're out and off in meetings, I see other owners pull up their phones and constantly, you know, checking their business, and that type of investment into your business, you're able to flag things. For me, if I'm in an industrial part of town, and if I have a truck that covers my camera, you know, I can make a phone call into the shop if I'm not here, and immediately ask the neighbor if he can move the truck or reposition my cameras. And so your investment into your business on that level, I think, helps prevent a lot of issues that you don't see coming. But it's, you know, being there, availability, being on the spot and capturing those things. With the whole COVID thing, having security allowed us to have crowd control when we did have those rushes of people thinking that we were going to close the very next day. Mm-hmm. So having that security to be able to spread out, they take on a lot of work as well. And just like your bartenders and management do, I mean, they are so much part of your team. And I think that having them here really helps and establishes their presence, but also helps, you know, mitigate any potential issues that might come down the line that you don't see, like with the trucks moving in positions and blocking your cameras and moving those cameras, because we have PTZ cameras so that they're zoomed in a different direction. And you can't do that if you're not paying attention to your business, or if you're not present, or if you're not here. Outside of that, I can't think of, unless you have drones and you can see things coming from miles away. I mean, what other layers of security you could add to it, you know? And this is why I think this panel is so great, because you have Tony, you have Doug that bring in a perspective, you know, that they see such a larger picture when it comes to what can happen in our businesses. You know, I can speak from my retail association and here also as a retail business owner, and what we've gone through and what we still continue to try to do as an industry to flag these things, you know, 5 years out. And it takes participation by the industry as well. Like, our voice is only so loud because we have so many owners that come in and speak from that perspective. But the more that come in and let us hear their issues, the more we can go and advocate for change that might be 2-3 years down the line.
I think one of the things that my takeaway is, and especially in California, it was a big wake up call to a lot of business owners that they may want to look at their emergency planning. Forget about whether the civil unrest or whether, but what are they going to do? Especially, like, you know, let's say this was not a civil unrest. Let's say it was an earthquake. What is your emergency plan looks like? And I think a lot of business owners' takeaway was they didn't have a plan. They didn't have a well thought out plan. And, you know, I think a lot of them are going to be much more prepared, because I think they're going to take a little bit more ownership and say, in an emergency situation, what is our procedures? What is our protocol?
Correct.
And then to add to that, I mean, it's so important to have that plan. And then that last kind of mile, if you will, is then train the employees on it. I mean, so if it's a disaster recovery, it's really taking that next step to disseminate that information, just like you would for training on a new software or on workers' comp claims or safety. I mean, kind of same, but it's just that next layer of insulation, if you will, that you can add to try and reduce the chaos if and when it happens again.
Right.
Yeah, that's critical. I mean, one of the parts of the regulations I find myself quoting the most to people is, you know, that the act, omission, or failure of any representative is considered the act, omission, or failure of the licensee themselves. So for some of the owner operators or licensees who feel that, oh, I have a security guy that does that, or, oh, that's that person's job, or, you know, and have that, it truly is as if you yourself was conducting that activity. And that responsibility of engendering not just a culture of compliance within your company, but Javier, what I love so much about where you're coming from is a culture of care. And that's a relationship in terms of, you have to look at how are you training your people, how are you treating your employees in a way that not only are they prepared, you know, formally or structurally to respond to these situations, but they respond with that kind of care that is.
Think about the COVID situation and how stressful of an environment it is for, you know, your team to think that they can get sick. This wave of customers that come in, you know, I'm down there with them side by side. I can see that uplifts them and makes them feel like they're not alone. How many owners come in and do that? And I hope many did, you know, that I was aware of, but it gives them just that much more of assurance that everything's going to be all right. It's under control, that we're taking the safety protocols, and that we're sanitizing every 30 minutes, and that we're proactively doing these things before the county announced it as something that you had to do.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, we do have some questions rolling in, so I think we can start moving through some of these. The first question that we got was, did insurance companies typically cover the loss of cannabis? So this one's going to be for you, Doug.
So
what has to be in place for that to happen, I guess.
yeah, so that's where, like, literally, I was just talking to a client today, and they're conscious of it, where they're not going to cover the cannabis unless it's specifically covered. So, I mean, if you look at the applications, it really kind of picks everything apart. You know, what's your limit for your building? And if you lease the building, I would take building out. What's your personal property? What's your equipment? But the cannabis is the most expensive. I mean, you have to specifically say, I want the cannabis covered. And let's say you're a dispensary, so you're looking at no raw materials, you're looking at all finished products. And one, great, we've got X amount, like $500,000 of cannabis inventory. So one, now we can put a price to it. And then when it's put away at night, it's got to be in a safe that's large enough or bolted, and you got to have the surveillance 24/7 video, and it's got to be 1 hour rated, and then, and a 24-hour burglar alarm central station, then you'd have coverage. But you got to specifically, so nothing is automatic. I have clients that we go over because it's expensive. To cover cannabis, let's say your business personal property, I'm going to wing some numbers. Let's call it 40 cents on the dollar. Cannabis is going to be $1 to $1.25 per $100 of cannabis. So it could get expensive quickly, but it's just that risk transfer. Some people say we don't need the insurance for that one. Others say, you know, I'd rather pay, you know, that dollar on every 100 in case there's a fire or a theft. I get more concerned about a fire because a fire is going to take everything. Theft, you got, you know, your TL rated safes, and there might be a partial loss, but the fire, nobody's going in there when there's a fire.
So in a practical way, when in doubt, talk to your broker, right?
For sure.
To be like, is this covered? And be specific.
Absolutely. Is my jarred flower and my pre-rolls covered?
Right.
Good.
Be specific. And then this is an interesting question that I think kind of, I'd love to get all of your perspectives on this, because obviously, Javier, you represent the membership of UCBA, and then from Doug from the insurance perspective, Tony from the security companies, is they're asking, are retailers bouncing back from the break-ins? So my question would be, one, how's your membership doing, Javier, and what is the process, I guess I would say, of rebuilding for the retailers? Are they seeing the insurance payouts? Are they, you know, opening up again? What's going on?
You know, so as a retail business owner, it's always difficult to come back from something like that. It could really hurt. But what we have in UCBA, like our businesses, is this community of outreach where, you know, everybody's reaching out to each other. What do you need? What could I help you with? You know, what could I put on your shelf, and just help to get you back up and running. And so we saw a wave of that throughout our membership, of people coming in and helping one another. And so I think that from that, we saw that part rebuilt. As far as construction or anything to that degree, you know, it's difficult to try to track and trace that with every member. But I know that whenever somebody raised their hand and said, "Could I get that extra hand?" we were there collectively helping one another. So I can't think of anybody that didn't rebuild back strong, and that we weren't there for. And so we want to continue to see, you know, how that's impacting everyone else that I might not know or aware of out in the state, throughout the state. And maybe Tony and Doug have had those types of outreach from people that we're not hearing from. Well,
I mean, one of the things that, you know, we do a lot of training when it comes to break-ins and emergency planning. And I don't want to kind of make it a little bit of a negative, but I'm going to show you, I think, I can't show you my screen. Okay, anyway.
You got more pictures?
I had one more picture, but I'm just going to speak to it. So it says 60% of all businesses are not prepared for disasters, but the key thing is 40% of companies that have a disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or it's a civil unrest, do not withstand, are not open after 5 years of business. And they say 1 in 4 businesses that have had a disaster may not even actually open the doors at all. So it's really important, again, when you talk about disaster recovery, you're talking about some of these dispensaries, you know, everyone's invested all their money in it, and there's literally nothing left in that dispensary. Showcases, lights off the walls, you know, cameras, just not forget about the cannabis itself. There's literally nothing left in those locations. And, you know, if there's another dispensary down the street, the customers are just going to go down the street. So it is very difficult to come back from a total disaster, again, whether earthquake, fire, hurricane, or civil unrest.
Yeah, I mean, I've always, and this is back to the pandemic issues that it caused cannabis businesses, because obviously so many cannabis businesses are between a rock and a hard place on, obviously they have to uphold federal standards in terms of employment and labor, and there's all these taxation. So you have a business that's already working with such scant, you know, profit margins, period. And then and ineligible for any of the support that's offered for a standard business, and yet they have to go above and beyond in so many other ways, and in very expensive ways, from the keeping historical video footage on systems that are incredibly expensive, and the security requirements, and reporting requirements, and you know, and then you have 280E, and so
Right.
Anything you did make, you have to give it away. So I mean, that's like the part that I always try to drive home for people who aren't clear on the cannabis industry and think everybody's rolling in cash and everything's great, is like how vulnerable these businesses are, period, how much they've had to go through simply to exist, and then how devastating any kind of loss can be for those businesses.
Julie, I think you hit it on the button, because I mean, I've thought of this before too, and not self-serving because I sell insurance, but when I look at what insurance can do, you can't just go down the road and get a new banking relationship and get an operating loan, you know. And so it's almost like the insurance can be the saving grace, because there are elements, and man, it just hurts when I know there's so many people that don't have the proper insurance and the proper coverage, because you can get your product replaced and you can even get your income replaced. Now, you still got to prove all this, so it's not an overnight thing, but we can write business interruption insurance that says if it's a coverable loss, which a riot would be, and you're shut down for 6 months, they can look at the accounting and show, hey, they lost this much money in that 6 months of revenue, profit, besides your stock and inventory. So it can make you whole. It's a slow process, but it can make you whole. But just so many people don't have the proper insurance. And I get it costs money, and I get there's so little, but it's just, this is exactly where we just, it's a gut punch to us insurance folks, because we're like, God, we got some tools. We just got to get you guys to look at them and then potentially afford them. And then when something like this happens, it shines a huge light on, I wish we could have done more. I mean, but it's a slow process. I mean, think of the rebuilding process and the remodeling and putting new cabinetries in and beautiful stuff like that. And, you know, but it's possible. But I think Tony's right. I mean, there'll be some that just can't come back. And then especially if you don't have the insurance assets and you can't come up with another, you know, capital call, so to speak. Yeah, it's going to be, it's very saddening.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, I can't get over how much of a struggle it is for the cannabis industry to simply exist. And then, you know, how much of a setback any of these events are. But I mean, if there's one thing I do know, that the people in the cannabis industry know how to overcome obstacles. So that is what we've got going for us. So there's two questions we can somewhat combine. One of them is, and I got Tony, maybe we'll send this to you, and Javier, if you've seen any of this, but they're asking, where do you think some of the operators who were robbed, who did experience this, fell short? If
Javier?
From what we've heard, the ones that I was outreach to didn't have overnight guard. They just had their videos and their alarms going off. And so when they checked their cameras on their phone, they were like, oh, they didn't expect it, you know, and it took them by surprise. Whereas even in some cases, guys that did have overnight guards, they were just overpowered to what Tony was saying earlier, and you just kind of move out of the way and not endanger their lives. So I think that we saw people that had, you know, at least someone to call, you know, for backup, or call, you know, 911 while it was happening there at the spot. Might have had a faster response, where if nobody was there, then, you know, it was kind of would help prevent, you know, in my area was that I had an overnight guard that was able to sound an alarm and prevent that. But you don't know, you know, how bad it is when you've got 30 people coming in through your door, or to Tony's point, you know, more than that. That is a very hard thing to think about.
I think the one takeaway from this, and like I said, I've seen it in other disasters, is a lot of the business owners didn't think it was going to happen to them. I think that's kind of a deficiency in a lot of security designs, that it's never going to happen to me. You know, one of the losses in one of the dispensaries, the looters kicked in the metal door that housed the cannabis and looted what was in that room. And there was a safe. Actually, it was a TL rated safe, so it was a very good safe. But there was almost nothing in that safe, because when they left at the end of the day, they never thought that anyone would come into their location, where it would have been quite easy to put a couple of pounds in that safe that night, and they never got into that safe. So a lot of takeaway. It's the same thing I see in robbery awareness, same thing I see in employee theft. You know, the biggest deficiency I see, again, is it's not going to happen to me, so I don't need to worry about it.
And I could say, you know, from a on-the-ground compliance standpoint, working with a lot of people, I see that a lot, where they have spectacularly written security plans with written security protocols and all of these great ideas that are not being executed on the floor. And some of that is because there's already so much strain on businesses simply to exist. They find it difficult to do. But obviously in these situations, that's where it becomes key that you actually do all of the things that you were attesting you would do. And then of course, how that impacts your insurance, if you know, and how your insurance actually plays out and pays out. Which kind of ties into another question somebody asked, which is, would a more robust physical security design allow for lower insurance cost?
You know, I would like to say in theory, yes, but no. I mean, meaning like they've got their box, and their box is pretty good. I mean, it's really strong underwriting. I mean, think of just what you guys said. If you have all that flour and you don't put it in the safe at night, you're not going to have insurance coverage. And the worst would be if you're paying for that insurance coverage and you're paying a lot of money for it and you don't follow through with your SOP, and then you get robbed, there's going to be no coverage. And I mean, I hate to say it, but that's kind of fair for the insurance company. If the insurance company says you got to have 24/7 central station, you got to have in a certified safe, you know, and you don't do those things, they shouldn't hold up their end of the bargain, you know, but those are also going to make you a safer operation. So typically, if you follow the insurance companies, I mean, you're going to have a better operational safety program. I mean, it's just, it goes hand in hand. So maybe this much to a degree, but not a whole lot.
But Doug, wouldn't it be fair to say, you know, we deal with a lot of accounts that the insurance company contacts us because they're in distress. So they're a distressed account. They filed a number of claims. They've had a number of losses. They're being ready to lose their actual insurance, where it'd be very difficult then for them to get any insurance anywhere else. So down the line, you know, not having a robust security plan is going to cost them a lot, because they're not going to get that insurance because of the claims that they're filing.
No, that's Tony, that's a good point. I mean, and the way the insurance companies work here too, and I don't know if there's a better way, at least right now, but they say, okay, we have a very broad application, check all the boxes, just like those SOPs, you guys, check everything you're doing. You got a vault and it's made of this and cinder blocks, it's metal on all four sides. Check, 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 check. Then they bind the policy, they pay the money, everybody switches up. Then we're supposed to go inspect it. So typically in that next month or two, the insurance company should send an inspector out, and that's when they're gonna go, okay, check, and they're just really validating what the application was, because really the carriers don't want to take in premium either and not pay out a claim. They know that looks bad for public interest, and they're gonna make enough money. I mean, they're insurance companies. Their names are on the sides of every large building in every large metropolitan city. I mean, they know how to do that. So it's kind of like, all right, well, then they'll cancel that policy, which is true, or they'll take off theft. You still might have fire coverage, but we took away theft because you didn't have a certified vault or safe. But that's how you can run into some trouble. But they should be testing and verifying to make sure everything's on the up and up, because they like it more black and white. Insurance carriers don't like it when it's gray, where they're like, okay, well, hold on, is there not? They'd rather just pay out, believe it or not, they'd rather pay out on a good claim because that's the contract.
We got one more question. Somebody had emailed earlier to ask this too, and they're asking if any testing labs were broken into or robbed. I checked my circle. I hadn't heard about any testing labs being targeted. In some ways, I think it's because they don't have the same kind of visible presence as retailers or other businesses. Did you guys have any experience or hear anything of a testing lab having an issue?
Not on our side.
No. All of them were dispensaries.
Mm.
I would think the labs might not have quite as much flour, but I guess they could actually have it a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's all in little tiny bits.
Well, a lot of the labs are often not on the main road, or they're off the beaten path. Remember, you're talking about the looters are moving in droves of 500 to 1,000, and they're going down Main Street. So that's where the dispensary is, and there's not a lot of labs on Main Street.
Well, and I do think, I mean, from what I've heard and what I understand happened is there kind of was like, some coming together of elements, both kind of what I would call naturally occurring civil unrest and disobedience with some of that turning into property damage and, spur of the moment, non-premeditated robberies. And then what looked like targeted, professional operations of prepared robbers coming in to specifically target cannabis companies.
We had a location where when they went to the location, the owners and to board it up, there was individuals at the front that were not allowing the looters in because the gang members were inside and they were taking what they wanted. And then after that was done, they left, and then they allowed the looters to take whatever was left. So we actually witnessed what you just said. Yeah,
which I think some of those nuances are important, especially in terms of that preparedness, because even just as you talk about, there's a difference between day-to-day and what happens in civil unrest, and then there's kind of this other meta tier of what happens when you're getting hit by a targeted, sophisticated robbery in the midst of civil unrest, and that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
But all right, well, I would love to say first I'd love to say thank you all so much to Tony, Doug, and Javier for speaking. I think there's so much more to talk about, but just as kind of a last leaving thought, I just wonder from your perspective, like what can we do, what can you do, what can people do to help the cannabis industry recover from this and to move forward and be stronger?
Support your local licensed legal shops. They need, as much support as possible. You have still here in the city, a lot of illegal operators that might still be operating. Support the guys that are playing by the rules. And a little takeaway after this conversation is everybody go back and go over your SOPs, especially your closing procedures, and talk to your security team more often. And really, for me, it's really those closing procedures that are going to help a lot of businesses, because to Doug's point, you don't want to get caught with your product on the floor. You want it stored away every night. And while that requires, that extra hour or half an hour for somebody to stay and work to make sure that that's done, it's so important that it gets done.
I also love, Javier, what you said to me earlier when we were talking in preparation for this, which is, to go thank your security team and go thank your workers where they've carried your business through this time.
Yep.
And that's, I think that's so much of what we're seeing now with what businesses were deemed essential and the workers who make those businesses possible, and how much we owe them in our respect, thanks, and admiration.
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that we're doing, we made a decision we call it paying it forward. We've been working with California dispensary owners, advising them on how to improve on their security. We're not charging them for that. We have clients from San Francisco all the way down to Los Angeles, and several in the actual city of Los Angeles. And I think the one takeaway that they're trying to do is, how do I avoid this from happening again? What do we need to do? There's new cities are coming on board in California right now, and they're looking closely at that. We're doing work in Fresno right now, and that's one of the things that is going to come up, is how do you design security to prevent a civil unrest, which is not something you saw in California before that. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that. So, we've worked with over 350 cannabis clients, and we want to give back, and we offered that service right now to a handful of our California clients that had some issues.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
In closing with me, it's like every time there's chaos, there's opportunity. And so this is just an opportunity for more education. And, Julie, the CCIA, especially on the risk management committee, it's just like education, so we can teach about, the various types of insurance or the better security protocols, et cetera. But we got to just keep learning and keep improving. Nothing's magic.
Yeah, education is so key. I'd say, I still have friends who don't know the difference between a licensed and unlicensed store. So, it kind of starts at that ground level of, and the field is wide open in terms of when you have an opportunity to help educate yourself and anybody else about this industry, best practices, how to support businesses. But I'm so grateful for you guys taking the time to join me this week to educate people about these topics. Thank you guys so much. This recording is gonna be available, and we'll be able to circulate it for those who couldn't be there today. And because Tony, because I gave you host duties, you're gonna have to be the one to make it stop, because I can't.
Okay, I'm gonna make it stop now then. Okay.
All right, thank you guys.
Take care.
See you,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.